All right. Hello to everybody that is tuning in with us tonight for another wonderful episode with the Coach's Corner. Just a couple words while everyone's getting settled in. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat tonight and passing off the questions to our wonderful coaches for the evening. If you have questions that we cannot get to, by all means, head over to the Coach's Corner and they will take care of you there because they're a wonderful group of men. So I'm going to pass this off to our host for the evening, Duke Brannos.
Well, welcome everybody. Hopefully we have another great night on the Coach's Corner, and we're looking forward to a bunch of questions. I know for at least me, I'll probably have a bunch of questions for these guys, just myself, because I'm pretty excited about having them all here. I'd like to thank His Grace Aighleanan for once again coming and being on the show. He's always somebody that brings in tons of people to the show and has great stuff and feedback to give. I look forward for a great episode with him again. Plus, I just get to hang out with him, so it's cool. And of course, His Royal Highness over here, all ready to go. And obviously, both these gentlemen are some of the best fighters in the known world, and we're lucky to have them. And of course, the best part is we get Tristan tonight, even though he wasn't planning on it. He made some time, and I'm happy because I just get to hang out and talk with Tristan. And if anybody, as everybody knows that have been watching for a while, he has some great insight, and I love hearing him talk. So thanks, Tristan, for coming out.
Thank you, Brannos. Appreciate it.
So tonight we get to talk about kind of, how to train for Crown. And, I know personally, I have not only seen it many times. I have people traveling to our fight practice from Ethelmar, from the East, from Eldemir, from Merdiers, all over the place. They were like, I want to come and train for Crown. And every time in the back of my mind, I have to stop from screaming. And I'll be like, come on out. I'll help train you. I'm not that I'm going to train you for Crown necessarily. But also, in that place, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I have in fact, many of us here have a mindset of, and Aighleanan put it really nicely why we were talking earlier, you train for life. And in our life, we're very fighter based and competition based. So, I train every day just to fight in every tournament the same way. And we had a very strong opinion on it. And then when we started talking about the episode itself, we kind of had to roll that opinion back. And I think Aighleanan's going to talk about that a little bit more. And I look forward to talking about a lot of things that go about training for Crown. And Tristan brought up some other things like, this sometimes that training for Crown is the test, and kind of on a martial art background of it. And I was like, wow, that's a great point to make as well. And so I'm hoping we have a lot of great subjects here for you today. And I know that even, especially with the Olympics going on, there's even some ties in there that we're going to kind of try to cover a little bit as well, because we do have some mental pressure in what we do in our game. And we have seen that really come to life in the Olympics here. So Aighleanan, tell me about training for life. What does that mean?
So same thing, Brannos. I've definitely had people show up and say, yeah, I'm training for Crown. Can you help me work on some things? And, my normal militant stance is, well, you're doing it wrong then. You should be training for life. You should always be trying to, you train because you love our sport, our fighting martial art. And, you understand that it's a lifetime process. And so over the years, I'm sure I have had very uppity responses of, well, you're doing it wrong. You got to work on, you just got to work on trying to train all the time. You train just to perform at a certain level, and then you just got to figure out a way to treat Crown List as just another opportunity to perform. And while I believe that still very firmly, if you check your ego a little bit, and I had to check mine a little bit, there are absolutely things along the way that I did and I see other people very successfully do to get ready to perform on that Saturday or Sunday, depending upon how people are doing their Crown List. That is beneficial, and then you can roll into adding those things to how you train for life. So I think there are some tips and tricks that we can give that maybe some people haven't thought of, and also point out some of the things that some other people have done that are very successful. Jokingly, I saw where His Highness Meridies said, well, where were you guys, when I was trying to do this a couple, weeks or months ago, trying to get ready for this. And it's like, the obvious thing is you did relatively well without any of our suggestions. But the thing that I actually wanted to point out is he did something extremely well. He fought within himself. I mean, he tried to make every fight the kind of fight that he wins. And that's something you can train for, and it's something that you can try to reinforce as you're leading up the weeks into Crown List. So he did something actually quite smart. He prepared and managed to be able to manipulate the fights into things that he's good at. So these are things that we can offer people as advice on how to get ready for Crown, and we definitely have a number of things that we can go through here that are tips there. But the important thing is even if you are training for Crown, if it's worth doing, it's probably worth adding to your overall. You're always training. I had some things I wanted to add. That are like training calibration. Because you don't want to get into Crown and mess your reputation up. So you should practice certain calibration things. And then when I look at it, it's like, no, that's a train for life thing. Always practice your calibration, because like everything else, if you're not practicing it, it won't be there for you when you need it. So everything that we have here is a train for life thing, and it can also be very specifically the tournament in 3 weeks, or the tournament in 4 weeks, or the tournament in a couple months. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm really glad you guys had me on.
Yeah, something that Brannos had kind of touched on a little bit, this idea about, getting good enough or training good enough for a particular tournament. We've all seen so many people get wrapped up in the concept of, I've got to win Crown, or I've got to win this crown, or that sort of thing. And usually what ends up happening with that is people end up going to practice with this mindset of being able to beat an individual. Like, if I can get past this one guy, then I can beat everybody else. And so they go to practice and they focus on, what they need to do against that one person. And that's like, that may or may not help you in a particular list, but it's not sustainable as a lifetime strategy. I mean, if you just, to Aighleanan's point, if you just, if you're trying to be the best fighter in the world, right? Which is a hefty, that's a big ask, right? But if we're trying to be the best fighter in the world, then that's a lifetime thing. That's something I'm always trying to pursue. And I know for me, the way I've always looked at it is, I'm going to say that I want to be the best fighter in the world, knowing that I'll never be able to make that claim, which means there's always something for me to work towards. There's always work for me to be done, because I'll never be the best fighter, or I'll never, but I always have something to try for and keep being better. And eventually you end up amongst the best fighters in the world. But this idea of going to practice and trying to beat one dude so you can get a little bit further in Crown is just not sustainable. And that's where I always tell people that you have to stop trying to be the king of practice. Because you go to practice and you try to beat the guys who you think you're going to have to compete with in Crown, and the fight that you're getting out of them at practice is not necessarily the fight you're going to get from them in Crown Tourney. they may be working on something that they need to improve on because they're trying to be better fighters. And, you go out there and you tool them up one day and you start thinking, okay, that's it. I can go win crown right now. And it's just, short-sighted at best. And again, it doesn't go to that long-term strategy of just like, try to be the best you can. We had a question come in. We're going to be talking about this in a little bit, about fighters who train harder for bigger fights. And we'll get to that in a minute, but that's some opening thoughts from me on that as well.
Sure. Yeah. And my comments to add on to this are, I just remember how many traps that I fell into, that I saw my fellow fighters fall into when they wanted to go compete either in a high-end tournament or a crown tournament, a royal tournament. And the traps are many. And the advice that has been shared so far is the conclusion idea of how you avoid some of those simple and stupid traps. One of them being, well, I know that, like, for example, let's say I knew that these three guys were in a royal tournament. It's like, okay, I got to know how to beat Sean. I got to know how to have a plan to at least beat Brannos and Aighleanan. And you start thinking, okay, these are all very technical fighters, and you absorb yourself into a very high level of technical fight. And you train hard for that. Address the hard training here in a second too. But your mind is on somebody who is deliberate, very dangerous, very technical, very studious. And then you get matched up with some guy who just throws the kitchen sink at you in the first round and just floods you with so many shots that you get taken out. Your mind is on a whole different type of fight, and you don't even get to halfway through the tournament because you kind of set yourself in your own way. And the answer to that problem is exactly the advice that was given is, you need to train to spot the type of opponent you're going to get, to be able to adjust to the fight that they're presenting you, and to be able to handle it. It's a whole different thing to be able to handle somebody like Rangvalder than some guy who entered the tournament. He's only been fighting 2 years. He knows he's not going to win, but he just wants to absolutely go gangbusters for 30 seconds on you. And you got to catch every single one of those shots and block it or dodge it. One miss and it's over, so, and that can shift you way off your confidence when that happens. You think, oh, I've got this, this first round guy, I have more experience than he is. And, you lax a little bit, and now you're starting off at 0-1. And as we've talked about in numerous previous episodes, 80% of performance is mental. The physical part is the foundation, but the mental part is where you really get to that performance level. So if your physical training is, you don't have confidence in it, your mental will have a very hard time. And this is where I get to the training hard. And this kind of, maybe we can feather this into the question about training hard for crown. I very much believe in training smarter rather than training harder. And by that, I mean, target exactly the deficiencies that you are having trouble with. For example, if let's say, you wind up losing confidence if a fight isn't over in 30 seconds or a minute, you start questioning yourself. Just start having longer fights. If you need to line up 3 or 4 opponents right in a row, as soon as, one gets tired, you put another one in and you put another one in so that you get used to extended fights. But while you're in there, keep your mental poise. Make sure you're fighting smart. You're not making dumb mistakes. You're not starting to question yourself. That's some way to address the mental side, but it has to be focused on what the problem is. Just blanket bombing and doing a lot of sparring, or, just being the first in armor and last out of armor, which is not a bad plan, won't necessarily get you there if what you're doing while you're in armor is not well focused on what your deficiencies are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead, and you kind of feathered into that question, and I'm gonna cover the question a little bit more, and people can add what they'd like on in the next discussion. The question was, fighters, we look at boxers and MMA guys and all of those guys, they train harder before fights. They go to camps, they work out super hard, they train harder. It's not that they they stop training in between fights. That is absolutely not it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is 100% right. You can train harder before a fight. But for these gentlemen, usually train harder means that they're physically making themselves stronger. So there's that physical level where they're running more, they're pushing themselves more, they're conditioning their stomach, they're conditioning their body, and they're tightening up their diet to make weight. They're tightening up their eating habits to make sure that all of their levels of vitamins and everything else is set perfectly. That's, you can absolutely do that going into a bigger fight. And I think we're going to cover that a little bit with Tristan's comment about the test, right? And but understand that they're also, in those fights, they're fighting one person. So, they're also training for, hey, these are the shots you need to work on to fight this person, or training how to beat that person. So that's also stuff that goes in there. But under all of those pieces, all of that physical piece and all of that, we're training to beat this guy piece, 90% of what they need is already there. In other words, they've been boxing, they've been doing MMA, they've been doing it day after day after day after day. They are just grabbing that last 10% to try to make sure that they are ready to go. And so going into crowns, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we have a bad habit of saying, I don't have to do nothing until 3 months before crown. And that's what we're talking about. And then that's the part that really sinks in. It's like, oh, I hate that, And I'm going to tell you, 3 months, I'm happy to get somebody 3 months before crown and work with them, because all I'm worrying about is actually making them a better fighter. Really, in 3 months, my goal is to make you a better fighter. I don't care if you win crown or not, personally. I want to make you a better fighter. And that's where I go. And in fact, if you come 2 weeks before your crown, it's like, I want to I want to win crown, so I gotta do this. It's like, there's a level, and Tristan brought this up a number of times, and that is confidence. If you lose your confidence, you're done. I don't care how much training. I don't care that you ramped up before you went there. I don't care you're physically stronger than you ever have been. If you lose your confidence and you lose that the mindset, then it doesn't matter everything else you've done. So, and I've seen this in my own practice, where people will be like, the week before crown, they come see how they're going, and they've been training with me, and I will train them to be a great, fight, and I'll break them down. I'll be mean to them when I have to, and I'll be good to them when I comment, give them good comments when they've earned it. That week before crown, I am fighting at a very high physical level with them and pulling them into that level with me, so that they feel like they have just had the best fight of their life and stayed toe to toe with me. Are you asking me if I couldn't have killed them by bringing my energy down, and I could have been more patient, or I could have been, I could have one-shotted them out the gate? Maybe I could have totally done that, but I keep that in the back. What I'm trying to do is boost their confidence, because if they go into crown with confidence, they have a lot better chance. That's my way of helping them win crown. If I go out there and one-shot them or beat them 10 times in a row, how are they going in the crown?
I promise this is quick, but you're so right, Brannos. Before I won my first crown, the week before, I fought Duke John the Bear Killer in a tournament. It was the first time I ever beat him, and I had so much confidence going into the crown that I won. I mean, that confidence is important, and I don't really care how I beat John. I beat John. He was a living legend, and I lost I lost the finals of the tournament right after that, because I was still so high from that victory. But I was able to take the high from that victory into my confidence into the first crown that I won. And you're so right. Confidence is such an important part of this, and maintaining it. That's a very neat thing that you're doing to give people the confidence on that week before, the weeks before. And it's hard to do. You've really got to humble yourself to allow someone to compete with you.
Yeah. Sean, you had something.
Yeah, I had a couple of different things, but I'll touch briefly on the confidence as well. I know when I finally won Cornet list, which is the first Royal list that I won, the big change that I'd made from the crowns and cornets that I'd been in previous to that, where I was, every time I didn't win, I was just totally destroying myself about what a terrible fighter I am. But going into that list that I actually won, really the thing that made the difference for me was the realization that I am going to do well in this list. I'm going to go deep in this list. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to win, but I'm going to do well. And if I know that I'm going to do well, and if I fight my best, then I have a chance of winning. And that again speaks to some of that confidence. And sometimes it's just knowing that, not so much that I'm going to go win this list, but I'm gonna do well, and people are going to know that they've got a fight on their hands. And the other thing I was mentioning was when you're talking about these guys that come to us and they say, if you're coming to us 3 months before Crown asking for help getting ready for Crown, you're already at least 6 months too late. And certainly 2 weeks before Crown isn't going to do it either. When I do my fighting clinic, I prefer to schedule to come to see somebody and teach my class right after Crown, like maybe 2 weeks after Crown, where all of that fighting experience is fresh in their head, where we can talk about what happened in the list and the lessons that they need to learn from there, and then they have 6 months to work on those things and to make improvements on that sort of thing. But coming into something like that and trying to teach somebody like 2 weeks before Crown is a disaster, because now you've got all this new stuff that is totally foreign to them, and now they're going to try to implement this right before Crown tourney, and that is just a recipe for disaster. That is just a mess. I mean, 2 weeks before Crown is not the time to be making changes to your fight. I mean, there's a case to be made that if we're fighting for life, then it doesn't matter when you make those changes. And I often tell people, if I give you something that is easy for you to incorporate, then by all means use that. But there's so much of the new stuff that you're not used to, that trying to change that right before a list of that import is really is going to throw off all your confidence. It's going to throw off all your technique, and you don't know who you are as a fighter at that point.
And that leads into a common trap I think we've seen quite a bit, which is when you get a fighter who goes into a high level list like that, they get an opponent, they throw their best stuff, and it doesn't work, and they think, oh, well, I'll try something that I don't use very much in the hopes that, well, that'll work. And now you can just watch them from across the field and say they're fighting outside their comfort zone. Like, they're just trying to dig deep to find something to throw at them. The idea that you try to strap a supercharger onto a car, just to at the last minute to make it faster, it doesn't work that way. And it's a trap in setup prior to the tournament, and a trap when you're in the tournament thinking, oh boy, all the stuff that I've trained, nothing's working. I got to go outside of my comfort zone. And then it just turns to garbage generally.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we're kind of covering some subjects through people asking questions, and we actually covered our first two, and I'm just going to throw them out there just because I find it interesting. The first was get the body right. And the first question was, why do people train in professional fights essentially? And what do we need to do in the SCA? And that's about getting your body right. And then, get your head right. And then we're just covering that. And Tristan really kind of rolled into that in the last one, and get that confidence. And then Aighleanan and Sean really, nailed it. And, I guess the next kind of topic we're going to cover a little bit is this piece that, what's that?
Real quick, can I add this on the
please.
body right?
Yeah.
So many people train for the first round of Crown list, and if you're not training for the last 2 rounds, you're not doing it right. It doesn't matter how much energy you have so much in the first round. Get your head on right and go out there and let your body perform. But people are fight. When you're getting your body right, you're trying to make sure that you have enough to finish. And that really means some conditioning. And I know there's a lot of guys in the SCA that win crown list who look like they're overweight, but they're oftentimes very physically specific to being able to do just enough of the right short burst exercise to get them through. Ideally, if you have an athlete's body, that's better. But more importantly, you have to train, and you have to learn how to have something, in rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8, depending upon how big that list is, out west, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so getting your body right is not about being able to do one fight well. It's about being able to do 12 fights well, 15 fights well. So I think I see people sometimes training for one fight at a time, and then they don't have the gas to do 12 fights at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. And so, we see that, and, I've been lucky enough to have been in a lot of Candlemasses, and, usually to win a Candlemas, you're about anywhere from 36 to 42 fights in by the end. And I've been wiped, and so it is definitely one of those scenarios where you do have to train, and not for the first fight, but train for that last fight. In other words, you have to really, and some of that, even in boxing, we see this, some of that you may have to go into spaces where you're like in a round robin. It's like, okay, the next guy is someone I know I can handle. I'm going to bring my energy down, and I'm going to find my place to relax a little bit. You have to be relaxed and careful, but you can relax, take that energy down, take the round off, kind of like in boxing, and then get your breath back so you can continue on. And so there's a lot of management of that piece, and I would agree 100%, Aighleanan.
You have to be efficient.
But
was that? People think about fighting as being heroic, and when you're doing it right, it's efficient.
Yes, 100%, as small as possible. So
and that's something I was going to point out too. I mean, being physically fit is always better, like Aighleanan said. But ultimately, crown tourney in particular is not as much a physical contest as it is a mental exercise.
Yes.
There are like athlete quality fighters that people that are just ripped and have all the cardio in the world, but they don't have that mental part down. And there are a lot of great fighters who have never won crown, and there are a lot of mediocre fighters who are dukes. And it's just being able to get your head right is a huge part of that. And if you can't breathe at the end of the day, that's going to be a problem for you. I know His Majesty Morgan down in Aidenville, famously had said that he got to the finals of one crown and he lost because he got gassed out. And then, he started doing the insanity workout to get his cardio up and hasn't lost a crown since. So that can be a part of it. But there's so much of the mental game that is there as well that it is. I have long thought
the mental allows you to remember to breathe.
And to do all that stuff that Brannos, to do that stuff that Brannos was just talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Managing your list and managing these fighters. And it's like, well, I've got this guy who likes to do this sort of stuff, so I can bring down the energy so that I can have a little bit more gas in the tank for the next guy in the bracket, if that's where it has to be. But, understanding what all that is and managing your list. Even if it's a random draw or if it's a bracketed list, or, I know for our crown recently we did pooled lists, and I always manage my pools, I know who the last two fighters in my list are going to be in that pool, and I manage that. And that's part of that mental game.
I would
leg the guy who's trying to chase me. It's not an accident.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out, there's another question that was asked that we kind of covered the first question. But the next question was, obviously contenders need to be able to fight well. What are the mental aspects of strong contenders in crown? And I think we're covering that. I think we kind of burned through that. I think there's that level of confidence, and there's the managing of the fight, and there's the managing of your list and your energy, and managing of your opponent's energy. And there's all of those places. And I think we're kind of covering that, but I wanted to make sure the viewer know that we didn't directly answer the question. Say your question and then answer it, but we're going through it and answering that question now. we started talking a little bit about getting invested in what you do, in fact, because we train what we do so much. It's like, hey, here's my number one shot. I mean, great fighters, and then this is fundamental across boxing. Tyson, everybody knows how Tyson's going to knock you out. Everybody knew how Muhammad Ali was going to knock you out, and they're going into those lists knowing that. In fact, not only knowing that, but train for it. And guess what happens? They hit him with the same 3 blows over and over again until you knock them. You're knocked out, and that happens. It happens in fighting all the time. They're like, oh yeah, Brannos is flat step, and then still get hit with it. It's and it may not be right out the door. It may be, hey, I throw some other stuff, I tension some other areas, and then I hit you with the flat step. It's those kinds of things. But I think we touched on it. I think it was Aighleanan and Tristan touched on the idea that you have to be careful that you do have a bread and butter, but what happens when somebody takes those away? Right. And I think that was a kind of a topic I think is important, because that's where you can lose that confidence. Right. And if you don't have more a broad background, that foundation, then it's very difficult to regain that confidence back and win that fight and manage that fight. So Tristan, Aighleanan, who would like to go first?
Aighleanan, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the next question. I'm terrible.
So Aighleanan, this is like, hey, I am not going to let you stand out of range and kill me like the other 99% of the fighters you do. What do you do now?
So there are.
This is that breaking someone's confidence down and taking away. This is one of the things you brought up, taking away the thing they do well.
Sometimes it's a competition of will. At the moment, you're winning the competition of will. You have taken what I want to do away. So there are multiple approaches you could do with this. You could try to then go into the other areas, or I could try to take something that you're doing away. I could even try to take what you're doing to me here away. You can approach it that way, but sometimes you'll see, it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to move and try to do something else, because the bread and butter is still going to be there. The bread and butter is the muscle memory shot. If I'm looking for it and you're taking it away from me, if you're trying to take away my at range C shots, then great. We close closer to B. I then do anything I possibly can. I create some noise with my shield or with my sword or whatever, and I quickly step back into C. Now it's back on you, because now I got where I wanted to be anyway. It just started by going in first. So are you going to immediately come back and maintain, and I've seen Brannos do this. He would maintain that B distance or that threat distance to the point of really frustrating me, and then my turnaround, the only thing I could possibly think of to do was, man, I'm just going to stick my thrusting tip in your face and hope that you go away. And it turns out he didn't want to run into my thrusting tip. So I may not have got back to C because he extended further, but at least now he has to come back to C to get back to where he wanted to be, to put the pressure on me again. And so it's make an adaptation and then run with it. But I still very much, when someone takes away what I want to do, I try a different way to get there. And if they take that away, I try another way to get there, because whereas it's great to have a million tools, I have 2 or 3 that are really good. I'm going to do everything I can to get back to my 2 or 3 things that I do really well.
Tristan.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And long ago, I was kind of reflecting, like, okay, how would I want to build myself as a fighter? What would be the most dangerous opponent that I could imagine, so that I could try to turn myself into that, if it makes sense. And what I realized was, as I looked around, there's so many different fighters and how they approach things. You can't really choose one particular one. For example, like, let's say you want to basically be an A-ranged fighter, like a brawler, and you pour all of your efforts into training that way, which probably works great when you encounter fighters that don't deal with a brawler very well. They don't know how to do it, and you get great success. And then you run across an opponent that he loves it too, and he's better at it than you are. So really the in my opinion, what I thought would be the most dangerous opponent is the one who could assess what their opponent likes and what they don't like, and be able to be that opponent for them. For example, if somebody has got really long sword, for example, doesn't like somebody jumping up into A range on them. So if you can spot that and say, I know what's going to be his worst day, and that's the fight I'm going to give him. Now, granted, that's not a very quick path of training, because you have to train to be pretty good at a lot of different types of fights, but to recognize what's going to work well for you and really what's going to be what your opponent doesn't want to deal with, like that makes you very adaptable. And I like the way Aighleanan described it. Like, if you try an approach and it doesn't work, you try a different approach. You're basically using adaptability to go to find your success, rather than just keeping pounding away with something that you think will work, but it's proving not to work. And just an observation I'll throw in there. And this is when I was basically working on being pretty good at C range, being pretty good at B range, being pretty good at A range. What I realized was that most fighters, even really good ones, take a moment to shift gears. They have a different fight for A than they do for B, and different for C. And it takes them a moment to shift gears from one to the other. So what I found that I like doing was shifting into a new range. As soon as they shift into responding to it, I change the range again. So I basically am shifting a half second ahead of where they are. And overall, it worked better than not. I mean, it wasn't like any kind of a panacea, but the idea that somebody's fight takes a moment to shift from one type to another, I found to be something that I could exploit in even some pretty good fighters. But the adaptability, I think, is the key. And I do agree with Brannos. Like, most fighters will have just a few bread and butter things that are really good to work on. And I come back to Bruce Lee's thing. I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 different kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. However, you also can't be a one-trick pony. So there has to be depth to set up that kick that you have done 10,000 times so that it lands successfully. And the setup is where I think most fighters, especially as they're coming up, have a hard time comprehending how all the intricate things that happen in the setup of that shot that finishes. They think, oh, I just need a super fast snap, or I need a really great combo. It's not the shot that you throw, it's when you throw it and what position your opponent is in when you throw it. And that's the tough part. That there's no shortcut to training that. That takes a while.
Yeah, and this kind of all goes to this question that we had on the Day of Crown. Are you watching and analyzing the other fighters and to get an idea about what to do with them, or do you kind of go to your happy place and ignore everything? I know going into a list, we have fairly small lists. This last one was 14, and going into it, I knew who was going to be in it, and I knew who I was going to have to face. And in fact, going into this list, I knew that I was going to have to fight the guy who fought in the finals, Sir Gabe. I knew I was going to have to fight him at some point. I knew it was going to be good. And leading up to the list, I'd kind of gone through some scenarios of some things that we had done, and I'd fought him just a few weeks prior to Crown as well. So yeah, I'm going over in my mind some of the fights that we've had, and kind of getting an idea about some of the things that I've done that worked, some of the things that he's done that worked against me. But ultimately, when we ended up in the finals together, none of that came to fruition. But because I had gone through all of those scenarios, I was prepared for all of those things, and it made it a lot easier to just kind of adapt to what was actually happening in the fight. And that adaptability that Aighleanan was talking about is huge. Because I'll say I don't mind saying this, because Gabe told me after the list that when we got into the finals, he was trying to get me. He was fighting with Madhu, and he was trying to get me to attack that Madhu. And I think Brannos was mentioned. It's like when somebody gets an idea about, it's like, this is how I want the fight to go. And he wanted me to attack that Madhu, and I didn't. I was responding to what I was seeing in the fight, where the fight was taking me. I was was responding in the flow and the organic flow of the fight. And he wanted the fight to go in a specific way. And when it didn't go in the way that he expected it to go, things didn't quite go as well for him.
Probably chipped away his confidence when his agenda didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And so yeah, getting kind of prepared for it. I mean, otherwise, I mean, I do a lot of that prep ahead of time, but you know, when the rubber meets the road, and that kind of goes back to the other question that kind of leads into this is, you know, as far as, you know, somebody asked if it's better to focus on offense or defense, you got to focus on being you, the most accurate representation of who you are as a fighter. Because if you're trying to be anything other than that, this whole thing is going to fall apart.
Well
and you just gotta have, again, that confidence to know that you've been here before, or even if you haven't been here before, this is the best fight that I have, and it's either good enough or it's not. And if it's not good enough, you get with your trainers and you find out why it's not good enough, and you spend the next 6 months working on improving the part of it that is deficient. So, and I know Alan had some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for sharing that. That was really insightful. But going back to almost any question that we're going to get today, and that I've had in the last 15 years, is on Crown Day, do you do ... The answer is, I do what I train to do. If you need to go to your happy private, I see guys do this. They'll be like headphones on. They don't want to talk. They're waving you off and it's stuff. It's like, you didn't train for that. You didn't train to be completely isolated before you have to perform. You're going to train the way that you want to perform, and then you're going to perform the way you trained. And if you're trying to do something different on Crown, you're going to F up. You're going to make mistakes because you're not allowing the training to come through. You suddenly got it in your head that you needed to listen to your Get Fired Up music. And it's like, I never saw you at practice listen to your Get Fired Up music. What are you doing? Why are you doing something different? So one of the questions we have, do you watch all the fights and analyze them, or do you go to your happy place? What do you do? You shouldn't be trying to figure that out on Crown Day. What did you train to do? Now, I personally like to watch as many fights as I can, just so that my brain is always in that analytical mode of watching fights and thinking about fights. And this is whether I'm in the tournament or not. That's what I do. So on Crown, I'm very relaxed, but I'm watching. And I'm not watching specifically for what I've got to do. I'm just doing it to keep my mind to do the same thing I would do if we were just at practice or a pickup.
And it's entertaining.
It is. I love fighting. So
Yeah.
for me, that's my answer. But your answer, everyone's answer should be, do what you've trained to do. It's like, well, I'm not going to eat because I don't want to get messed up. It's like, is that your thing for regular tournaments? Is that your thing for, practice? Okay, fine. If that's your thing, but don't make Crown different in this regard. Train to perform, and then perform like you trained. I know it's a stupid sounding cliche mantra, but it's important. You got to.
No, I think that's fundamental. And I think that's the biggest piece. Some people want to be someone different. And, if you want to be somebody different, then practice being that different person right off the bat, because you're going to perform, your best pace of performance is who you are. And that is that's the key. That's why we say train for life. In other words, just keep training. And Tristan posted a great article a number of weeks ago about just keep going, putting those hours in. It doesn't have to always be super intense training, but just go and keep doing it. And if you haven't read that article, we'll try to repost it after this. I'm going to go on to the next subject because we covered a lot of questions there. And thanks for everybody posting in the comments, because we got some great fighters out in those comments areas that are commenting back and posting stuff. And that's really what makes the show great. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we appreciate that. Some that we talked about is pay attention to your calibration, at the practices leading to whatever tournament. Because you don't want to go into that tournament so ramped up on killing somebody or winning that you forget about ruining your reputation or, ruining the reputation of the person you're fighting for. And I think that's super important. And it feeds into a number of other things. It actually feeds partially into it feeds into last week's episode on crown calibration. Sometimes we go out there and we try so hard, we forget about our calibration. And you're adrenalized, you miss stuff, all of those things. You're trying to do something different than you normally do. And that's when things like that happen. So, I think it's super important that if you're doing what Aighleanan just talked about, being yourself, then your calibration is going to be normal. And, you can push your energy and your mind and all of those to the next level, but don't get so lost into them that you lose your calibration. Because in the end, you may have won crown tournament, but did you really? Yeah. And there are people that are going to point at you and say you did or didn't. And that's not the way that you're really hoping to win your big tournament. So
well, that was a comment that Brian made when we had the episode on why we do and why we don't win crown. One of the we had His Grace Brian Tarragon on. One of the things Brian mentioned was like every time you enter crown, you are gambling with your reputation, and it's a risk and it's a gamble, and sometimes where you're playing that hard money is in the list itself, because how well your list goes or how well your reign goes often depends on the way in which you secured the thrones in the first place. And yeah, if you had some shady dealings going into it, you're going to find you're going to have a hard time, getting the support you need during the reign. And it can be not a lot of fun.
I've heard guys say that, well, when it's all said and done, they'll still call me Count or they'll still call me Duke. And I got news for you. If you win a crown with an asterisk, that asterisk's with you forever.
Yep.
True.
Fact. Tristan, you have anything on this?
Yeah, Aighleanan actually posted a question in here of a suggestion. What we should talk about is what makes crown different. And what struck me is an old quote from Napoleon. And he said, a soldier will fight long and hard for a piece of colored ribbon. And in essence, what we're talking about is that same thing. I'm going to have a permanent title. I'm going to be a royal peer if I win this tournament. I'm going to have that piece of colored ribbon that everybody will respect. And, and we know that that's exactly what a royal peerage is. Now, people at the very experienced who know, how that tournament was won, and if it was done shady or something like that. Yeah, well, we usually know about that reputation, but the average SCA person will just say, oh, that's a count. They're wearing a coronet. You get the cool jewelry. You get the title. You get to be higher on the OP. That can be a big distraction. And I guess that would be in the mind space of do not let that be a distraction to you. The distraction can be, well, I'm really looking forward to being crowned. I'm really looking forward to, making my lady or my consort, putting them on the throne. I really want to do that. All these passions, some can be noble, some maybe not so much, but even if they are noble, they can still be a distraction to you. They can take you away from where your mind should be on that next fight, or the fight that you are in right at this moment. And so it's, there are many mind traps to avoid. And this is definitely one of them, not letting the perceived prestige that you're going to get should you win to make you more nervous than you need to be.
So, that's a great lead in because, we were looking at what you're going to get. And I, we're going to lead into the next thing. And this is one I kind of brought up, just because we're living this one a little bit, and it's been very interesting watching how it's developed. And that is what happens when you already have it. You also have the pressure trap.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're supposed to win, so now you don't want to let people down, and that is very, very difficult to deal with mentally. Because not only you're trying to deal with winning, competing at a level and breaking your opponent down, but you're also trying to deal with that pressure that the expectation is that you win and that people are in your corner really pulling from you, and that, you know, there is no doubt in many people's head that you're the best fighter in the kingdom, you're going to win. But that leads us into another really bad place where now it's like, well, that person couldn't beat me because I'm supposed to win. So that blow must not have been good. Or I can't take that blow because then I'm not going to do what everybody expects. You know, and we're seeing this kind of play out in the Olympics. We have such, you know, and you know, I think a lot of people think, Aighleanan, Sean, Tristan, we all work in this space where it's like there's an expectation and that you have to live to. And that's a very difficult place. And we have Olympians that are living through that right now. They train for one event over their whole life practically. Mm-hmm. And they're there, right? We're lucky. We only have to worry about social pressure. In their case, they have to actually literally worry about what happens to them physically if they miss something, right? Not only this social pressure of winning a gold for your country, you know, and the expectation that you do it because you've done it before or you've been the best for the last 5 years. But now, if you miss something, you could hurt yourself for life. Or you could hurt yourself to not be able to go to the next Olympics.
Or even to appreciate that the window of your competition is narrow. You know, we can fight in tournaments for 10, 15, 20 years. You're a gymnast or somebody, you know, by the time you're 22, you're starting to get too old. So, you know, your window is very narrow. You got one couple of shots, maybe, depending on the sport, of course. But, you know, even within the SCA, knowing, well, if I don't win, I got to wait another 6 months, you know, unless you're in the West, you wait 4. Even that pressure is, you know, is significant.
So I'm going to throw that question out there because like I said, we're living that right now. And so understand that you don't have to be Aighleanan or Sean to feel that pressure. It could be you're the best baronial fighter that they have, or you're the best household fighter, or you're an up and coming guy. You should win. You know, So Aighleanan, how do you handle that?
I'm going to fall back on the basic tenet of things. I had to relearn how to think about performance. Quick anecdote. I fought in my first crown list when I was a squire. I had no expectations to win. I actually did relatively well. I got close to the quarterfinal. I think I was in the quarterfinals when I got knocked out. But that was just, I was wanting to be seen. I wanted to put my name in the plate of squires who will one day be somebody or one day do something or whatever. The next time I won after I'd been knighted, I fought with the expectation that I was going to win. It was my time. I'm a good fighter. I'm the hot young stick. I'm absolutely going to go win this tournament. And I did everything different. I prepared differently. I got to the event. I went to bed early. I went to bed sober. I got up earlier than I ever got up. I got showered. I got breakfast. I was one of the first people to armor inspection, and I fought terribly. But I did everything differently, and I had a set of expectations, which were the wrong expectations. I went into Crown List to win Crown List. And I actually literally took myself into a field after the list and had a conversation with myself and said, all right, do it differently now. What do we need to do? And what I told myself was, you're a good fighter. You're going to win Crown List. Relax, treat it like any other tournament. Do whatever you got to do to figure out a way to treat it like any other tournament. And so I went to practices. I just worked on trying to be a good fighter. I went into that next list, and I had a few drinks the night before, just like I always do. I was one of the last people up and, kind of run into inspection, one of the last people, just like I always did. And I went in and I very confidently just fought the list. And suddenly it was the finals and I fought those confidently too. And I won. And I've not lost a crown list since. And that's the things that I've put into it was fight that list like every other list, but also train to perform and do well in every list that you fight in. And so the pressure, and I absolutely get it. If you don't get butterflies before the finals of a tournament or before the finals of Crown List, I mean, you're some stone cold person. What you do with those butterflies is important. I take those butterflies and I take that energy in my stomach and I'm trying to center it into, all right, remember what's important. Remember how to do this fight. What do I know about my opponent? Cycle through as quickly as you can, all those things, but take that nervous energy and do something constructive with it. But I still, the last tournament I won was my 6th crown and I was nervous going into the finals. I cherish that nervous energy because it is a privilege to have got there, and I may never get there again. And it was important to me to win. And so I took that nervous energy and I tried to cycle in. But all of us have seen crown lists where you get to the finals and you can see people who are doing the wrong thing with their nervous energy. They're not capitalizing on it. It's just coming off of them. Their head's everywhere except where it needs to be. So we've all seen that. So I handle the pressure by treating it like it's everything else, like it's just another fight. But I also fight every fight that I'm ever actually trying to do well in. I treat every fight the same, whether it's a pickup or if it's practice, where we're in practice, we say, okay, this one's going to be crown style, or this one's going to be, this one is an actual fight where we're sparring to see who's going to do well. And I'm not training, I'm putting the training to practice. And so if I've practiced that, when it's time to actually do that, then it's just another fight. Take a deep breath, focus on how you do that, and then perform. And let your training come out. So, that's how I've managed the pressure. It's absolutely there. I've absolutely felt it. I do not want to, you tell people, well, don't ignore the pressure or whatever. No, use the pressure. Let it help you focus, not get crazy.
I actually have a similar evolution in my royal tourney journey, if you will. As soon as I got squired, my knight won, several crowns in a row, and so I'm like, okay, well, this is how we do this then. And so it kind of got in my mind. It's like, you get knighted and you go fight crown, because that's kind of what we do. And I got knighted early, and then I went in the military, and then so I was out for 6 years before I came back. And as soon as I got back, I had this thought in my mind that I had to be this great big thing. And and there was all this coulda, woulda, shoulda pressure that I put on myself for, well, if I hadn't gone to the military, then I could have been king already, and all this just bullshit, right? But like, that was what was in my head. And it seemed like for an eternity that I was like piling on this pressure of, well, I should have done this thing before and I haven't done it, and it's just really easy to pile that pressure on top of yourself. And it was that moment at, it was the day I won Cornet List is when I finally got over that, and I finally said that, I'm going to win one of these lists eventually, so it doesn't matter when I do this. I know I'm going to go deep, and that was that transition for me, and that's where I started being able to kind of find that center that Alan was talking about. Because you get into the finals, especially the first time in the finals, there's so much going on, and you're just like so aware of like what it all means, right? And for me, the mechanism that I use to account for those butterflies has evolved pretty much with every list that I've been in to a certain point. And now I'm very much at the point I think that Aighleanan is too, that like you know how to channel that. Like you find a way to do it. And so, it's not that I'm not nervous. It just doesn't manifest the same, gut wrenching feeling just doesn't manifest the same way, because I've found the mechanisms that I need to take that energy and take that excitement and use it for good, if you will. And and even going into this last final, this kind of goes to what Brannos was talking about, there's all this expectation that Sean's gonna win crown. Well, I can tell you that going into the finals, having fought my opponent just recently, knowing how very good he is, I went into the finals prepared for any outcome. I was not assuming that I was just going to steamroll this guy. I just fought him. I know that wasn't going to happen, or I didn't expect that to happen, right? And so there was never a moment where I said, well, I'm just going to go be king now. That never happened. I have to take that energy, I have to take that excitement, I have to channel it. And I use that to settle myself out, to make sure that I am just, as we've been saying, just to be the absolute most accurate representation of who I am as a fighter, because I know that if I put out the best fight and I put out who I am as a fighter, whatever that may be, and if I do that and I lose, that's fine, because I just got beaten by somebody who's just flat out better, and I'm fine with that. If I do not put out the best, most accurate reflection of who I am as a fighter and I lose, then I'm going to get all kinds of pissed off, because I know that's not who I am.
I wanted to just throw one thing in there, and this is less on the lead up, but when you describe that, and both Aighleanan and Sean did a great job of kind of describing their traps that they fell into. One is doing things differently. A number of people will often take that, they fight in a royal tournament, they put up their best, they feel like they're well prepared, and then they don't win, and then they beat themselves senseless over it. Like, they will take that into an attack on their own confidence that can last for months and maybe even into the next crown. And that's I love how Sean describes and the process of how you take your performance in a particular tournament, you make a laundry list of, okay, what are the deficiencies, what do I need to address? And this, I just wanted to throw this one in there, put on there, I want to rebuild my confidence. I don't want to let this become a landmine in my own brain that's going to stay here for the next tournament or the next one or the next one. And I think that the process of going through of identifying, what are the deficiencies that made you, kept you from being successful, writing them down, itemizing them helps take away that damage to your own confidence. Just as how do you work this into the training cycle, I think is an important thing to just toss in.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. That was a good add-on at the end of that. Kind of talking, a little bit, we talked about how we train and things like that. I want to make sure everybody knows that, and we saw it already. Sean and Aighleanan train a little bit a different way and handle that mindset a little different way. But you have to understand what works for you. In other words, even some of the things that we're covering may not work for you. You may come into it a different way, and you have to make sure that you understand that way. And maybe that is, you have to train for crown, because you need to be, that training for crown helps you be focused. Maybe it's, you need to take a break because you've been training hard for months and months and years, and you take a week or two break that lets all of that tension come out of your body, and it lets you perform at a better level. I think we want to make sure that that it's okay that you do things different than maybe what I do or what Sean or Aighleanan or Tristan does. But you have to figure out what that is, and then communicate that. Say this is just how I do it. I do know a Duke has also won 7 or 8 times or whatever, that takes 2 weeks off before every crown to make sure his body's good, his mind's good, and that that he can come in relaxed and fresh into crown. So just be aware that there are different methods to get you to those places. Aighleanan, you have any of that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There are a number of right ways. What we're trying to do is throw out some of the possible right ways. And when you come to us, what we're going to try to do is help you eliminate some of the wrong ways. But there are a number of right ways to skin this fish.
Yeah.
You know, I know people also who take the 2 weeks off or whatever period of time. One of the crowns I won, I fought the day before. You know, I to me, fighting is fighting. But what works for you is what you need to do. One thing I would like to add real quickly is that we're talking about crowns for high-end fighters as much as we just keep kind of falling into the group of people who and the topic is you want to win crown list. Well, here's some secrets. How to do well in crown is slightly different topic, but I want to make sure that we touched it. you know Set some expectations for yourself and try to meet them, and that's how you do well. That doesn't mean win. That means fight within yourself. That means call all your shots without any issue, because there's people who need to work on that. So make that a goal. Go out there, fight a tournament, call all your dang shots, and then go watch the rest of the list. You can participate in the magic of crown list at a lot of different levels, and I really encourage everyone who wants to be a part of the process to do so. And I do think that in some regards, you should understand at the minimum level of what the responsibilities are if you do win crown, but don't let that hold you back from participating in something as magical and as wonderful as your kingdom's crown list. If it's your time to win, you're going to win. And, then be receptive and let people help you. There's a number of royal peers and other people who've been associated with how the management of a kingdom works, that they can help you with that part. But mostly the people who win crown list are the people who want to win crown list. And it's perfectly okay to go participate in crown list because you want to participate in crown list.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And being a part of the process is one of the coolest things a person can do, whether it's as a consort or as an actual fighter. Crown is magical. I still believe in, I'm in, this is 30 years in the SCA, and I still believe in the magic of crown list. I still like to go and watch them when I'm not participating in them. I like going to other kingdoms' crown list. There's something palpable in the air as it gets closer and closer each round as you get to the end, because someone is about to make part of that kingdom's history. And whether it's they won for the X number of time or they're a new crown, and that's a lot of fun. Find ways to participate in your kingdom's crown list, whether it's as a strict observer or as someone who's working the list table, or as a marshal, or however you can. It is a significant part of the mystique and the majesty of the Society for Creative Anachronism, and it's great. And the reason why we've put so much emphasis on it is because it's a big deal for a reason. So on one hand, I tell people just relax and have a good time. On the other hand, also understand you're in something magical and something neat.
I wanted to
What you do
jump in
it's up to you.
with one anecdote that kind of goes back to what Aighleanan started that with, and that is setting a goal as you go in. I remember years ago, and this was not a royal tournament. It was just actually it was a local tournament, but a young lady came to me and she'd only been fighting for about a year and a half, and said, can you help me today? With my tournament. And I said, okay, well, kind of what she wanted me in her corner. And I said, okay, well, what is your goal today? And she's like, I just don't want to go 2 and out. And fortunately, she did not get paired up with anybody that was really way beyond her experience level. They were still a little above her experience level, but she won her first fight, won her second fight, and then lost 2. And so, at the end of the day, she came away and I said, well, how did it go? And she said, well, I got my goal. I said, well, was it enough? And she said, no, I should have set my goal a little higher. I should have not just said, I don't want to get blown out, because there was a mind change that happened. And that was an opportunity for her to learn and understand about how, if you set your goals a little too low, you can easily get them. And then your mind has just said, I've done what I've needed to do today. And that shift, it's hard to describe it to somebody who's not actually felt it, but anybody that has felt it knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so this is where your confidence comes in. If her or anybody, a fighter's confidence is only enough to say, I just don't want to get one-shotted twice, then, you may not be shooting quite high enough for where you are. So be a little ambitious. You don't need to go in and say, I'm going to blow through all of these, every opponent that I run across. That might be a little beyond you, but because that can create a confidence problem as well. But try to not shoot so low that you easily achieve it, and then your brain kind of checks out mentally. You're not ready to keep going.
Yeah, when we're to kind of follow up on what Aighleanan was talking about, and some of what Tristan was talking about as well. We keep kind of getting back to high end, crown contenders, people that want to win, but it is very important to understand and appreciate the mid range fighter who is entering crown to test themselves, to see where they were. And this is one of the topics that we were going to lead into again, is that it's a test, and it's an evaluation, and it's an opportunity to find out where you're at. Make no mistake, the purpose of crown tourney is to establish heirs for the kingdom. But that's, that can only be one person, and that's generally going to be somebody who, as Aighleanan said, somebody who wants that job. So if we're looking at, we should be looking at crown as a tool in our training process. Until you start getting into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals on a regular basis, just use crown as a training tool, knowing that you have an opportunity, even in just a double elimination list, you have an opportunity to go out and fight people when they are trying their hardest to compete and to do well and to execute well. And if you use it as that tool, and understand that you have at least two people that are going to be able to tell you that something is wrong with your fight, and use that to isolate those deficiencies, and then use that to kind of go back to restart that training process. And at the same time, to Aighleanan's point, you are part of the process. If all you have is a basic textbook flat snap, and you enter crown tourney and nobody can stop your basic textbook flat snap, then you get to win crown. And maybe everybody else should have put more work into it than you did. But there is something to be said. It's the closest thing that we have to having a vote in our power structure, as it were, or our command structure, is that opportunity for you to go out there and just say, if you can't beat this very basic thing that I have, then you don't get to be my king. And by doing that, you're part of that process. And yeah, if somebody comes out there and they block your flat snap and hit you with a better one, then great, they get to move on, and you don't. But being part of that process, for those of us that who have won several times, there is a magic in the whole process of crown tourney that we don't have as much luxury to indulge in being part of that magic, because the risk of us winning and having a job to do is that much greater. So on behalf of those of us who have to kind of pick and choose when and where we get to compete at our fullest extent, by all means, I encourage anybody to enter crown and be part of that process, and come test us and make sure that we're not just going to roll right through without thinking about anybody.
So Sean, can there was, well, actually, I'm gonna just go ahead and get this question out there, and I know Aighleanan kind of said anybody can answer this one, but I'm gonna make him answer it. Ben had a question. Essentially, he fights in tournament or at fights. Let's see, I find tournament fighting and a practice are very different mental mindsets. And he kind of calls out Aighleanan here a little bit. He's like, if we are, as Aighleanan suggests, to treat every fight as a tournament, like practice, or vice versa, how are we supposed to experiment and practice and things like that? And I think, actually, I think one piece, Sean kind of covered it. There are people that, go to Crown, learn that pressure and learn that mental mindset that you have to go to Crown, and learn your weaknesses as you win or lose. You have more flexibility at practice to do that. And I know anytime I go somewhere, I'll go and I'll ask people, I'll line up the unbelts. I'll ask them, at first I asked to line up the knights, and I asked, hey, do you fight these guys at practice, like, top game? And they're like, no, we give them a workout and we want to make sure we don't discourage them and so on. And then I'll line up and I said, those knights just told me they'd never fight you top game because they don't want to discourage you at fight practice. And they already get all pissy and mad and because they want that top game once in a while. And so, the thing I try to stress to both sides is that they come down so that they can help you learn. But then I stress to the knight side that this is also the time you communicate that. You say, hey, let's practice and work on your stuff. I'm going to work on some stuff as well. But then at the end, you're like 3 good fights, right? And I keep saying this at a lot of, I know you're probably all tired of hearing it, but 3 good fights. These are fights of like, I don't care who you are. I'm going to give you my top fight. If I hit you the same way every time, then I know I'm doing well. If I have to change it up, well, you made me change it up. Good for you. But my focus is I'm going to turn that switch on because I need to practice that. And then I'm going to present the best fight that I need to defeat you. And I'm going to practice that because you're still practicing, even though you're trying to get into that mental mindset of winning. So I think that's, just kind of cover that. There is places in practice where you can, kind of tone it down. But if you never practice winning, then you have a bigger problem.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like I may
we're
have
kind of about 15 or go ahead.
Sorry, but and you were breaking up a little bit, so I think I'll just try to cover it very quickly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Practice and tournaments, there are some differences for sure. But like Brannos said, the 3 good fights, when I mean, by at practice, you're practicing for how you're going to fight in tournament. Well, you need to learn to be able to turn that switch on, and you need to be able, and practice is a great place to learn how to turn that switch on. My very good friend, Duke Seth, used to just stink up a tournament until something pissed him off. And then he got focused and he fought great. Now I can't fight mad. And it's not that he was fighting mad. He used his anger to put him in a better frame of mind to focus and stuff. But I was like, you can't expect that to happen. What if nothing pisses you off in this tournament? You're not going to do very well. So when we started working in practice, it's like, all right, let's learn how to push the button to be competitive in practice so you don't have to get pissed off to win a tournament. And so what I mean by that is when, just like Brannos says, give me 3 good fights, or you'll hear someone say, all right, let's do a couple of Crown fights. Whatever the terminology is, we're now going to practice sparring competitively. And you learn how to do that at practice, and then you go to tournament and perform it. So, I don't mean that everything you're doing at practice is a Crown level sparring thing. But one of the things I will tell people, and this works for me, and I think it will work for anyone, make your mind work in everything that you're in all the practice things. Put your mind in the right place. So, whether you're hitting someone at the best of your ability, you can dial that back, but defensively and understanding range and trying to control range and trying to control pace, all those things that are important fundamentals of fighting, you can give those 100% of your actual ability in practice, not beat the crap out of your opponents. They still learn something, and you're still teaching yourself how to fight well, even against the guy who's first day, So I didn't mean to say that all fights at practice are like turning, but your brain space can be. So anyway, let's move on.
Nope, I think you covered it. Hey, Tristan, we're going to
Yep.
jump to you, and we're going to jump to the last one because I really like when you brought this up earlier. So do you want to cover kind of how you push your students, kind of
Yeah,
they
and this
out of
is-
that mental space of practicing?
Yeah, and this is something I think my SCA experience is very special. It brought to mind that focus of, okay, I have a deadline on this particular date. I'm going to be competing, and I need to have everything honed up. I need to have my mind set. I need to have my physical stuff in place to perform. From a martial arts standpoint or learning self-defense, oftentimes there is no deadline. You think, oh, I'm going to train to, survive being attacked or being punched, but when is that going to be? You don't ever have a time. There's no deadline. So you can easily say, well, I'm going to work on what I'm working on this week. And if I skip a class, it's not a big deal. Or I can work on these skills, maybe next week or the month after. What I've noticed, when I will tell one of my students, all right, next month, we're going to test and you need to we're going to make sure you're honed up. It lights a fire under them because now they know, okay, I'm going to have to perform. And granted, it's not like a Conan pit where we have somebody trying to rip their head off or knock their teeth out with punches and things like that. But there is pressure. There's pressure of being able to perform where your fellow students are watching, where your instructor's watching. You want to do well for what you've been trained to do. And every student, including myself, that went through it, there was those butterflies came up. That's what the point of the test is. And what I tell my students is, we're not, the purpose of the test is not to have you perform and pass or fail. It's for you to discover what your body is like and what your mind is like when the pressure comes on. From a self-defense standpoint, that pressure can be nerves when somebody starts wadding up a fist and starts screaming at you and wants to hit you in the mouth. Or any other type of situation. You realize you are in danger, direct physical danger. On an SCA field, it's going to be, I want to perform and I'm nervous. Will I be able to do it? And that's the exercise of the test, is to learn what your body does and what your mind does in that situation. And that's something that, in my case, normal classes, very hard to simulate that. At a fighting practice, you don't get that level of pressure or that level of emotional content. Whereas on the day where you want to perform, when it's important, everything changes that way. And really, the student or the fighter needs to know how their body changes, how their mind changes, and to control it in those situations, in those circumstances. So I think that test, for SCA to have a tournament, if you can do one every month or two, just to get used to, okay, today it matters. Now this is important. It's I think a very good learning experience.
So, looks like I'm kind of losing my internet a little bit. Aighleanan, do you have anything on that real quick?
Push the unmute button. I think Tristan summed it up beautifully. And I think understanding from a trainer's perspective the value of testing is probably, because this is Coach's Corner, and one of the, we're trying to help individuals, but we're also trying to help other coaches, and understanding that, even if they're artificial things, you should find ways to challenge your students and to challenge yourself to meet some goal or expectation. And Crown it's a standing test. It's there for us all the time. And I think the way he summed it up is perfect. And I don't know that I've ever really thought of it so much as a test. Let me rephrase that. I've never verbalized it. I think I have thought of it as a test, but I've never thought of it the way Tristan so succinctly put it. So I'm so glad that earlier, this afternoon, he brought that up and had a chance to share that with everyone.
Yeah, I kind of go through the same thing, because I always put my name down on the list for Crown, and what weapon system I'm fighting with will depend on whether or not we are prepared to do the job. And my favorite go-to recently has been fighting with a glaive. And with us doing a pooled list for the most part, I get 6 or 7 fights in my pool, and it's cool to be able to say that, well, if I was just, because we allow buy fighters to fight, and people that are not actually contesting in the list who are allowed to fight in the pools. Yeah, it's one thing to be able to say, oh, well, I would have come out of my pool if I was, we were fighting with a glaive. But getting in the quarterfinals is a very different thing. And that's where the test really kind of starts. And yeah, I mean, there's, being able to fight with a glaive, which is, my, 4th or 5th best weapon system, allows me to compete at a level at which I kind of need to be able to compete. We all have a bit of a competitive streak. And fighting with that weapon allows me to indulge that competitiveness and to try as hard as I can to fight with that. I mean, I think it would be cool to win Crown with a glaive. But until I do, it's that test. It's an opportunity to find out, what work I need to do with that particular weapon system to advance further in the list. And it gives me that chance to, again, as I was saying earlier, to be part of that process. Because one of the first times that I had fought in our Crown with a glaive was right after we'd stepped down from our last reign. And, there was a part of me that was like, if I win Crown with this weapon, then our kingdom has bigger problems than me doing back-to-back reigns. I mean, y'all need to like this is not my best thing. And so we need to figure out what you guys need to do to beat me with this, because I'm not that good with it. I'd like to be. And so I'll keep entering with that to try that out and again, to test myself out with a different weapon.
So Tristan, thanks for that. I think that was kind of eye-opening for all of us, and thanks for bringing that up. I think it was a great way that you can push yourself in different ways that even I hadn't thought about that much. So that was and Aighleanan, I agreed with all the things you said, and I really can't say much more about that myself. I think you guys covered it. But we also are coming towards the end of the time. We've had a bunch of great discussion in the forum or in our comments. My old squire, now knight, Sir Lionel, joined. He brought up kind of a question, so I want to make sure that we're covering our questions. And that question is, how do you turn that switch on? And I think that's it's a really interesting question, because I think it's very difficult for lots of people. And Jason, I'm going to answer it this way. I'm going to say, we're going to go and we're going to talk about it. And maybe and you guys can kind of pitch in here. Maybe this is an episode that we need to have. How do you turn that switch on? How do you engage to the top part of your fight? That kind of thing. I think there's be some interest out there for it.
Yeah, I think that would be a
John,
good
Tristan.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So and while we have people on, I think we're going to end up having to reschedule next week's episode. So Jason, this might be this might be something that we cover next week, if we can kind of fit it in. But for sure, I will tell you at fight practice when we have it, so you can join us again. But meanwhile, it's 9 o'clock. I have to say, this has been a great episode. I love, as somebody else said in the comments, that I love just listening to Aighleanan. He can go on and preach as long as he wants. I'm good. Just tell me what the 800 number is, and I'll send you money. And
but put you on with the operator to take your credit card number.
Sorry, it's $15 for the first minute,
and
$5 for a minute after, or so I hear.
But it's really, I tell you, it's been in just the stuff in the forums have been great. Beck's been posting in the forums, and we got Sven out there, and everyone else. It's been great stuff. I love watching there as much as I love listening here. And but before I wrap up, Aighleanan, do you have anything? I don't want to throw you out, and when you still had the last few things to say.
I wanted to say thank you. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to come and talk fighting with some of my heroes, some of my friends, some of my brothers, and I'm very fortunate in all three. I really believe that engaging your brain about fighting is every bit as important as engaging your sword arm. So, uh, I'm an unapologetic fight geek, stick jock. You ever want to talk fighting with me? Find me at an event, find me at a practice, and geek away. And we used to do practices where we would practice and talk about fighting the whole time, and then we'd go to a bar somewhere and talk about fighting, and then we would go to an event and fight and talk about fighting. And I am unapologetically into it. I love it. I love the people who love it. You know, chivalrically, when people are like, when we're in a circle and people are saying, "Well, what do you think about so and so?" And I am running through a filter in my head. How much do I think they love it? And they might have a lot of things going for them, and if I'm not sure of their passion for it, that's one of the reasons why I might say no, way more than their actual prowess or some of the other quote unquote peer like things. Do you love this game? Do you love the SCA, and do you love fighting? So people hear the preaching that I do, and that's just the manifestation of my passion. I love it a bit as much today as I did in 1985 when I started. And it is a thrill to get a chance to come here and talk to you guys, and to get a chance to share with everyone this passion for fighting. So I look forward to more coaches corners that you guys run, and I look forward to talking fighting with everyone when I see them. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. So like I said, we're going to talk about what next week's episode is. But I tell you, if you have ideas for episodes, post them in the chat, post them in the comments, get them out there, because we're always looking for stuff. We you can see we have an episode list that's queued up already and things, but we definitely would love input from our audience. Tristan's always out there polling people and seeing what might be the next thing we could do. And but we can't thank you enough, Aighleanan. We can't thank you enough for coming. Sean, I know you're a busy man. I don't know how you do it.
Some days I don't.
Really, yeah, I believe me. I get you. And Tristan, thank you for the idea of even getting us all together and pulling this thing all together.
Well,
so,
it's great we can get these people together. Always
Oh.
fun. When the miles we can't cover them. This is the next best thing.
Yeah,
exactly. I tell you, I can't agree more. So thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great night. Stay safe. Make sure you hug someone, or at least take care of yourself. And we will see you next week with some more fun, hopefully, and more education.
And thank you very much, Vesper, for hosting.
Oh, we can't thank Vesper enough.
Our behind the scenes ninja.
There she is.
I'm
Yay.
here. Yay. Yes, thank you all. Thanks to everybody that tunes in tonight. And as it has already been stated, we will see you all next week for another wonderful episode. So I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Friday.
all right, have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Yep. Good night.
Have a good night, everyone.